The premise for One Punch Man is built on a gimmick that really should have gotten boring after 2 or 3 episodes, but it didn't. And the gimmick in question is the fact that Saitama, the main character, the one-punch hero, can defeat anyone in one punch. And it really should have gotten old very quickly. But what the writer realized and understands very well is that there's one aspect, and so long as this keeps coming into effect, you can keep this idea fresh and keep the story going. And it's simply that Saitama can't be the sole main character for the story. Our story begins with an alien attacking and immediately begins causing mayhem and destruction and kills people, and this young girl is about to be crushed when a caped hero appears. But he looks a little underwhelming, especially when you compared with, this evil villain who's got this rippling muscles and claws and, alien appearance, who immediately jumps into his most powerful form and prepares, this devastating attack, and it continues to grow stronger and stronger, leveling up before our eyes, only for Saitama to punch him with one regular punch and immediately destroy him. The day is saved, and Saitama cries out in despair. And so let's take a step back, because this is not what we're expecting. This is not what you expect from the superhero movie. He's victorious. Why is this happening? Why did he react this way? So let's go back and take a look and see how we got here. Saitama was once a poor adult going through the soulless grind of trying to find a job that he would hate, to pay his bills that would eventually grind him into dust and destroy him. And he was continually getting rejected over and over and just brutalizing his own, emotion and mental sanity until to the point where he has a little desire to keep on going. He ends up seeing this young kid who's about to be killed by this giant crab man and saves him. He jumps into action and saves him, defeats the crab man, and after that becomes a hero. But he trains so hard that he defeats all of his heroes in one punch. And also, as a side effect, all of his hair fell out. And now life has no meaning. There's no struggle. There's no purpose. He has nothing to strive towards. And what we have here is a parody of the normal type of superhero action stories, where a pivotal moment in a character's life is what motivates them to become strong and fight against evil. This is Batman's parents getting killed. This is, Superman and his father, being raised as, Midwest American Kansas by his dad, having there's all these different moments. This is Luffy, getting rescued by Shanks and Shanks losing his arm. This is, Naruto getting, the Nine-Tails Fox and being ostracized. And what happens from here is this moment happens and it motivates them to become stronger and stronger and to fight against evil. And the story comes from the fact, the meat of the story and the characters are built from the fact that they're continually struggling to get stronger and they're continually facing against stronger and stronger foes. And this is, of course, until, theoretically at the end, they're super strong and they can defeat everybody. But, lo and behold, if you want the story to go on, you have to keep introducing stronger and stronger people. And so for One Punch Man, the interesting thing the story does is, because it's a parody, we jump straight to the end. Immediately Saitama is strong. And in fact, he's so strong that now life has no meaning. But this is the intriguing part for us as the audience, because we've seen the superhero story before where they're struggling to get stronger and become stronger to defeat level 2 man, and then we'll fight level 3 villain. But the problem is for the writer, for the writer telling the story about the guy who's completely overpowered, you have to have a character in his story that has to have some kind of struggle. It doesn't always have to be the main character. Think of Cameron in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Ferris himself comes out of the box almost a perfect character, completely at ease with himself, and just glides through life, dragging his friend along with him. And at the end of the movie, it's Cameron who grows and decides to confront, his distant and apathetic father, by destroying, kicking that car off. And what it does is it helps give this movie, in retrospect, a sense of accomplishment and growth outside of simply going on a fun joyride. And the same happens for One Punch Man. We need this sense of accomplishment. So how do we do that with a character who's effectively reached the end of their growth? And this is where we introduce Genos. And Genos actually plays the typical main character role that you would actually expect to see. His family was tragically killed by an unknown assailant and absolutely murdered. And by the help of this doctor, his life is saved and he's turned into a cyborg with all of these extra abilities. And now he's working as a hero to try and save others and keep what happened to him from happening to anybody else. And so by all counts, everything that, if you looked at this from the outside, he's the main character. In another story, he's the main character. And my Saitama is the mysterious and broody teacher who pushes his disciple and then comes and saves the day. And obviously the story is well aware of what it's doing. It's creating this role to where we're expecting, oh, here's the main character. Oh, this is what happened. But the parody comes through and starts changing it. But what the story does for this one is it plays out is that Genos ends up jumping into a series of situations where he defeats the first few people, but then it quickly finds himself in and over his head, only to seemingly he's about to die trying to save some innocent child or whatnot. And then at the last moment, Saitama shows up. And what you do is you're allowing the villain to build themselves up. He's super bad, evil villain, and Genos defeats them. And super bad, evil villain 2 shows up. But now it's even worse because now the stakes are higher. And what you're doing is you're raising the stakes. And so you really, really want to see somebody defeat them. And guess who comes in? Saitama. He comes in over and over again and saves the day, defeats the villain. And it's also that you build up the villain to somebody you really want to see get punched in the face. Maybe they're arrogant. Maybe they're super cruel. Maybe they're just egotistical. That kind of bully where you just want to flick them in the eye. And what happens? Saitama comes through and just destroy them. But the problem for the story, for One Punch Man as a story, is you do this a few times and then it has to change. You have to do something different or else it really is going to start getting boring. And so what the writers do is, okay, well, let's try a different hero. Maybe it's not Genos every time that needs to get rescued. Maybe it's another hero. Take Moomin Rider or someone else. But the effect is the same. A hero you like or a character you start to like is under pressure and about to be defeated by this overpowering evil antagonist. And the stakes are real. People are actually going to die. And you can keep using this to up the ante, making the moment more and more heroic. Moomin Rider is this really weak hero, but he still is ready to throw his life on the line. There's more people at risk, and thousands will die if they fail, and here comes the right moment, and Saitama jumps in and saves the day. And again, this works great. And don't get me wrong, when I say this only works for a bit, what I mean is it works over and it'll work a few times, but then you need to tweak it, you need to change it. But for the first few times, it works very well. But to keep the story working, keep the story new, you have to keep changing it. We have to keep tweaking it. We can't keep throwing the same new heroes into danger and Saitama coming to save them. And, Genos, it just feels old, it gets stale. And here's the key. This is the key aspect now when you're looking at these. The formula doesn't need to change. The characters do. Think of all those hundreds of gazillions of murder mystery shows, and they're all the same. And every day someone else is dead. There's a new motive. There's a new murder. There's very clear formula. But what changes? What separates them? The characters. And that's what makes the difference. This is where the character of Garou comes in. The key is that we want to separate him and create a different type of character that can play this shared point of view, play this main character role, because Saitama can't occupy it all. He needs someone else, needs that growth, needs that change, needs that potential for danger. And that's what Genos has offered this whole time. That's what Moomin Rider's offered. But now we need to change it. We're going to change it. We're going to tweak it. And so we're going to create someone different, and this is where we get Garou, because he's created something between an antagonist and an anti-hero, and he kind of continually jumps back and forth. And I would say probably very much an anti-hero, because while he hates the heroes and does everything he can to destroy them, their arrogance and they're full of themselves and their corruption, he doesn't turn fully evil, at least where I'm at, at the moment I'm working through season 3 right now. He doesn't cross the line that, murders children, which is not a high standard, but compared with the true villains of the show who are trying to gleefully murder children, you get the idea. What makes him endearing is that while he hates and dislikes the smug superiority of the Hero Association, it's the same reason why he hates the monsters. He has this core principle of rejecting anyone who tries to control or order him around. And there's a principle that goes along to it with a direct, violent simplicity that's really endearing. He reminds me a lot of Mugen from Samurai Champloo.
Talks to me like that. It kind of pisses me off and I want to resist even more.
And what makes his character great is a lot of the things you'll notice is the reason why it separates heroes from villains is because the struggle and this growth, this feeling of growth and accomplishment is usually solely reserved for the heroes, because it actually turns out if you started to have a villain who has this struggle and everything like that, who really is trying to fight their way up, you'd start to identify them, because you identify with the struggle more than anything else, sometimes even more than the morality of the person, because you see someone trying and failing, but they don't give up, and then they succeed, and then they fail, and they don't give up, and then they keep going on, and you can let this play out. And this is what makes Garou such an endearing character, and it makes him similar to Genos in a lot of ways, but also different because he feels him, because he is this anti-hero like role. And I think for his character, we'll see what ends up going on in the show, and I think it could go two ways, with Garou becoming a good guy and playing this Vegeta role, the villain turned hero. And it's really, really fun to see that, because you take all this pain and power and all this fear that this kid's, oh no, Vegeta's here, oh no, this character's here, all of that momentum that they bring, suddenly they're on our side. So now we have another ace in the hole. Imagine you're playing poker and you get another ace in your hand. It's, this feeling that you get as the audience. You want to see your heroes succeed. You want to see the good guys win to defeat the villains. And suddenly you have another ace in your pocket. And what it does, though, is it gives us these extra point of views to continue to look at. Because again, when I'm saying the reason why Garou and Genos are brought into these is because the story is told from their point of view for a lot of this. A lot of it is not from Saitama's, because you can't really have it fully from Saitama's point of view, or else it would get boring so quickly, because he's reached the end. He's stronger. He can't get any stronger from here. And this is why it works. This story works so well, is because the author understands this and keeps writing around this, because we keep having other characters have the point of view, and then Saitama jumps in and then leaves. Even though he's the main character, that's how it's set up. And it creates this tension, but the tension in the story never leaves the comfort of, this comfy comedy parody, because Saitama can still defeat anyone with a single punch. They always build the villain up. Oh, this time the villain's unlike ever seen defeated with one punch. This time the villain, and they keep building this up and over. So you're waiting to see for that moment, can he still do it? Can he still defeat them? And we can watch this battle, but it means for us, the audience, we can watch these fights and these battles happening without the stories turning into, an outright genocide if the heroes lose a single battle. This is the normal build-up that stories do. If action hero man or action woman doesn't stop the evil villain, the world will end. It's a simple setup. It's carrot and stick. Why is this interesting? Why does everyone do it? Why do we keep wanting to watch these types of stories? And well, the reason why is because we want to see if the world will end. We want to see if the hero gets to romance their love interest. There's good things that will happen if they win, and there's bad things to avoid if they lose. This tension of what will happen. Will everyone die? Will the world end or not? This is what the setup is. And for One Punch Man, it's different, because we have this ace. We have this, Saitama, the One Punch Man. And what it means is that we get to stand almost outside this tension. So we're waiting to see if the orphans will all get killed. We kind of know they're not, which means we can just enjoy the fight. We can enjoy the story playing out with this from this place of comfort. We'll have Genos or Moomin Rider, or somebody's doing something, and the innocents are on the line, and thousands could die, hundreds could die, but we're outside the tension, and we get to see how it plays out. But the requirement for this is that the main point of view can't be Saitama. It has to follow somebody else. It creates this great dynamic, because it allows the point of view to jump to a villain, and then they can happen upon Saitama and attack, and then just get obliterated. But that is required to have this different point of view. And you'll watch, if you read or watch the story, you'll see how many different points of view, how little do we actually just follow Saitama, even though he's, quote unquote, the main character of the story. And this is what's required to make it work, is because the gimmick for this entire show is that he defeats them with one punch. And this is the greatest strength for it, but also you have to keep continually changing this to make it work. Otherwise, it's gonna get boring. It'll feel boring to people because, oh my gosh, guess what happens? Here we go. That you have to keep changing, and this is why you keep changing the characters. And I'm really curious to see what happens after Garou. What do they do? Either he dies or becomes rehabilitated into the Vegeta role. What happens next? They might introduce another character, or they start having this gang. You know, there's a number of different ways you can do it. And so far, the author one is his pen name, and he's been phenomenal. He's done such a good job with the story. So I'm really interested to see where it goes. I've tried to read the manga, but every place I always read it has the chapters wildly out of order, and I've completely given up. So here I am watching the show. But let me know what y'all think. Does this type of superhero story work for you? You know, can the story keep the formula going without getting old? Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear it. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been a fun one to do. I absolutely love One Punch Man. If you're not familiar with the story, you really should check it out. It's a blast, especially season 1. I've watched season 1 a half a dozen times or more, and it just seems to keep getting better and better every time I watch it, which is not normal from there. So let me know what you think. Please do give the video a like, comment down below what you think. Please do subscribe. It very much helps small channels like this, and I really do appreciate the watch. So let me know what you think. Thank you all for watching. I'm Jeff Cassidy, and this is Fiction Applied.